Downtown Los Angeles, January 2013. A young woman checks into a hotel with a dark history. 2 weeks later, she's found dead, in a place no one can explain. What happened to Elisa Lam? And why, more than a decade later, are we still asking the same questions? Elisa Lam was just 21 years old, a Canadian college student from Vancouver, thoughtful, curious, and full of plans. She'd been traveling solo along the California coast, documenting everything on her Tumblr blog. Her posts were vibrant. Photos of city streets, snapshots of her meals, literary quotes from Chuck Palahniuk and Haruki Murakami. But there was also a hint of something deeper. Reflections on her struggle with bipolar disorder and depression. She wanted to see the world, her sister later told reporters. She wanted an adventure. For Elisa, this trip was supposed to be a break. A journey of discovery, not the tragic story the world would come to know. On January 28th, Elisa checked into the Cecil Hotel, now rebranded as Stay on Main. To budget travelers, it was just an affordable place to crash. But to locals, the building carried an infamous reputation. Built in the 1920s, the Cecil was meant to be glamorous, a stopover for wealthy businessmen. But after the Great Depression, it fell into decline, eventually becoming a hot spot for crime, drug use, and tragedy. Serial killers like Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, and Jack Unterweger once stayed there. Others had jumped to their deaths from its windows. The hotel stood on the edge of Skid Row, surrounded by one of the largest homeless populations in the United States. For Elisa, though, it was just another stop on her itinerary. She had no way of knowing that her name would one day be forever tied to its dark history. Elisa was due to check out on January 31st and head up to Santa Cruz. But that day, she never left. Her family back in Vancouver grew worried when her daily calls stopped. On February 8th, after more than a week without hearing from her, they reported her missing to the LAPD. Police searched the hotel from top to bottom. Dogs swept the hallways, the basement, even the rooftop. But they found nothing. It was as if Elisa Lam had vanished. Then on February 13th, the LAPD released a strange piece of evidence: surveillance footage from a hotel elevator. In the 4-minute video, Elisa steps into the elevator and presses several buttons. The doors don't close. She peeks nervously into the hallway, steps in and out, makes strange, almost fluid motions with her arms, as if she's pushing something invisible away. And then finally, she walks out of frame. The elevator doors close, open, close again. But Elisa never comes back. The video went viral overnight. Millions watched, mesmerized and unsettled. Online, theories exploded. In China, viewers nicknamed her Blue Lamb. On Reddit and YouTube, amateur detectives dissected every frame. Was she hiding from someone? Experiencing a psychotic episode? Was the hotel haunted? At the time, LAPD Lieutenant Alex Martinez urged patience. "There's been no update," he told reporters. "The investigation takes time." But for the internet, the mystery had already taken on a life of its own. 10 days later, on February 19th, the mystery took a grim turn. Hotel guests had been complaining about low water pressure and a strange taste in the tap water. Maintenance worker Santiago Lopez went to check the rooftop water tanks. When he pried open the heavy steel hatch of one of the tanks, he froze. Inside was Elisa Lam's body, floating face up, her clothes and belongings drifting beside her. Firefighters had to cut open the tank to retrieve her remains. The roof was locked and alarmed. The tanks were nearly 10 feet tall with heavy lids. How had she gotten inside on her own? The coroner ruled her death an accidental drowning. The toxicology report showed no drugs or alcohol in her system, only traces of her prescribed medications, at levels suggesting she might have missed doses. Her bipolar disorder was listed as a contributing factor. But the report raised more questions than it answered. No sign of physical trauma, no evidence of sexual assault, no sign anyone else had been with her. Police concluded there was no foul play, but they couldn't explain how she'd bypassed the roof alarm or climbed into the tank. With no clear answers, the internet filled the void. Some believed she had been murdered, possibly by a hotel staff member who then staged the scene. Others theorized she'd been hallucinating and accidentally drowned. Then the theories got darker. Some insisted the elevator video showed paranormal activity. Others tied her death to a tuberculosis outbreak in the area, because bizarrely, a TB test used nearby was called Lam Elisa. One theory wrongly targeted a Mexican musician, Pablo Morbid Vergara. Retired detective Tim Marcia, who worked the case, would later shake his head at the rumors. There were so many bizarre claims, but none of it was true. Elisa's parents filed a lawsuit against the hotel, claiming the tanks should have been secured. But in 2015, a judge dismissed the case, ruling that her death had been unforeseeable. Over the years, Elisa Lam's story has become an internet legend, a case that refuses to fade. Yet even after all these years, the core questions remain. How did Elisa get onto the roof? Why did she act so strangely in that elevator? And why, even after investigators closed the case, does the world still feel like something doesn't add up? Officially, Elisa Lam's death was an accident, a tragic combination of mental illness, opportunity, and a rooftop that wasn't properly secured. But mysteries don't fade just because the case is closed. More than a decade later, we still find ourselves replaying that eerie elevator video, scanning the shadows for answers, asking the same haunting question: what really happened to Elisa Lam?